Embervale was a peaceful village nestled in the shadow of Dragonspire Mountain. For generations, the villagers lived in harmony with the dragons who dwelled in the nearby caves. The dragons protected the village from outside threats, and in return, the people honored them with offerings of food and gold. The dragon's watchful presence had become a comfort, a part of life as natural as the rising sun. One autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared, a mysterious figure arrived at Embervale's gates. He was cloaked in tattered robes, his face obscured by a hood, but his eyes glowed faintly in the fading light. He introduced himself as David, a wandering sorcerer seeking refuge. Though wary of his arrival, the villagers were kind and offered him a place to stay. Little did they know David was not what he seemed. That night, as the village slept, David slipped into the darkness and made his way to the dragon's lair. With a hushed chant, he pulled out a blackened scroll, its parchment stained with forbidden magic. He recited an incantation, unleashing a foul green mist that seeped into the caves, spreading a vile curse. The next morning, the villagers awoke to an eerie silence. The usual sounds of dragons taking flight or roaring in the distance were absent. The village elder, Elias, led a group of brave souls up to the dragon's lair to investigate. What they found horrified them. The dragons lay on the ground, their eyes glazed over and scales dull. They seemed to be asleep, but were unresponsive to the villagers' calls. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the first signs of the curse became apparent in the village itself. Animals began to behave erratically, crops withered, and a strange chill filled the air. By noon, the first villager fell ill, and by dusk he was dead. Panic spread like wildfire. Those who had died began to rise again, their eyes vacant and their bodies stiff. They attacked the living, driven by an insatiable hunger. Gwen, the blacksmith's daughter, watched in horror as chaos unfolded around her. Her father had been among those who visited the dragon's lair and had not returned. Determined to find out what had happened, she armed herself with a sword and set off toward the mountains. At the entrance of the dragon's lair, Gwen found her father among the fallen. His skin was cold, his eyes empty, but he still moved. Fighting back tears, she steeled herself and put him to rest, whispering a prayer for his soul. As she ventured deeper into the lair, she found the sorcerer David standing over a dying dragon, a twisted grin on his face. "You did this!" Gwen shouted, raising her sword. David turned to her, his expression calm. "The dragons are ancient creatures, filled with power beyond your comprehension. Their death brings me closer to immortality." Gwen lunged at him, but David was quick. With a flick of his wrist, he sent a bolt of dark energy toward her, knocking the sword from her hand. She fell to the ground, stunned but not defeated. "You're strong," David mused. "Perhaps I have a use for you after all." As he approached her, ready to cast another spell, a thunderous roar echoed through the cavern. A massive red dragon, the largest Gwen had ever seen, emerged from the shadows. Its scales were faded and its wings tattered, but its eyes burned with fierce determination. This was Dracarys, the oldest and wisest of the dragons. "Leave her be, sorcerer," Dracarys commanded, his voice resonating like an earthquake. "Your dark magic has no place here." David laughed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're dying, old dragon. What can you do against me?" But Dracarys was not deterred. With a deep breath, he unleashed a torrent of flame. David barely had time to raise a shield, and even then, the force of the blast sent him staggering backward. "Gwen!" Dracarys called, his voice strained. "There is a way to break this curse, but it requires great sacrifice." Gwen scrambled to her feet, retrieving her sword. "What do I need to do?" "The heart of a dragon," Dracarys said, his eyes meeting hers. "A pure heart, willingly given. It is the only way." Gwen's heart sank. She knew what Dracarys was asking of her. "No," she said, shaking her head. "There has to be another way." Dracarys gave her a sad smile. "There is no other way, child. My time has come and I am ready. The bond between our kinds must be restored." David, recovering from the dragon's attack, sneered. "Do you really think you can save them, girl? This village is doomed, just like the rest." Ignoring the sorcerer, Gwen looked into Dracarys' eyes. "I will do it," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for everything, Dracarys." The old dragon nodded, lowering his head. With a trembling hand, Gwen raised her sword and plunged it into Dracarys' chest. The dragon let out a final breath, his body slumping to the ground as his heart began to glow with a bright, otherworldly light. Gwen took the glowing heart and turned to face David. This ends now. She held the heart above her head, reciting the incantation Dracarys had whispered to her in their final moments. The heart pulsed with a powerful light that grew brighter and brighter until it consumed the entire cavern. David screamed as the light engulfed him, his body disintegrating into dust. The undead in the village fell to the ground, lifeless once more, and the dragons stirred, their scales regaining their brilliant colors. Gwen collapsed, the heart still glowing faintly in her hands. When she opened her eyes, she found herself surrounded by dragons, their eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Gwen," one of the dragons said, bowing its head. "You have saved us all." Saved? The villagers returned to Embervale, rebuilding what had been lost. They mourned those who had perished, but they also celebrated the end of the curse. In honor of Dracarys, they erected a statue in the village square, a reminder of the bond between humans and dragons. Gwen was hailed as a hero, but she carried the memory of Dracarys' sacrifice with her always. She knew that peace had come at a great cost, and she vowed to protect the dragons as they had protected her people. And so, Embervale flourished once more, its people living in harmony with the dragons of Dragonspire Mountain, their bond stronger than ever before.